Toyota Land Cruiser 200. In addition to its unpretentiousness, the TLC 200 is famous for its gluttony, and this is perhaps the first thing that makes owners shell out steadily, thinking about something economical European. For example, about the Volkswagen Touareg. But no, everyone understands that savings on spare parts will end up being more significant, especially with long-term ownership, especially if the choice fell on a gasoline V8. Yes, a 4.7-liter belted 2UZ FE usually doesn't require anything more than a steady, large supply of gas to the tank. Given the solid resource and the minimum number of weak points, this unit can be safely attributed to the thinning caste of the so-called millionaires, although the facts of such a run have not yet been recorded. The only thing worth monitoring periodically is the level of antifreeze. As, perhaps, on all Toyotas, a pump may suddenly leak or the plastic part of the radiator may leak. Both of these are trifles that are solved in a day, and some of them on their own. In 2010, the reliable, but by modern standards archaic 2UZ FE was replaced by an aluminum 4.6-liter 1UR FE with phase shifters and a timing chain drive. Thrust increased problems too. Now, in addition to the level of antifreeze, you will have to listen to the engine and look for notes of chain clanging. If there are any, then welcome to replace the hydraulic tensioner, and immediately, without delay, otherwise there is a risk of an unfortunate jump. In addition, a more modern motor has shown its intolerance to the modern lifestyle of a city dweller, or rather to standing in traffic jams. In idling mode, the pistons, along with the rings, are actively covered with carbon deposits, and failure to periodically decarbonize can lead to premature wear. Although, I won't scare you, 400,000 kilometers the engine still leaves. I know it's strange to hear this, but in the practice of auto selection, after talking with the sellers of the TLC 200, it became clear that many not poor owners were not ready for the fuel consumption of gasoline V8s. This is probably why most of the Dwusotak purchased diesel. The 4.5-liter V8 is less voracious due to its greater efficiency, but it will gladly take all the fuel savings during maintenance and repair, which is likely to be required during long-term operation. The statistics of breakdowns in the Land Cruiser 200 diesel engine was expectedly spoiled by supercharging, or rather two turbines. By themselves, they are quite resource-intensive and are ready to take a puff for 250,000 kilometers as it should. However, engineers improvidently placed control units near the right front fender liner, where dirt and reagents methodically destroy contacts. Further, as in horror films, one of the turbines fails at a certain moment, the so-called Christmas tree lights up on the panel from a whole assortment of errors in the ECU, the car loses half of the horses, and the owner is preparing an article on the topic. Cruisac is not the same, with probably obscene content. Depending on the extent of the damage, the cost of treating this weak spot will be different. If you just restore contact, this is one thing. If the evil spirit took the entire ECU unit with it, it's completely different. Therefore, well-read owners try to prevent the problem by installing unauthorized protection or moving the blocks to a more humane engine compartment in relation to electronics. If you do not take into account the cases of passing the sealing rings of the injectors, then in conditions of more or less high-quality diesel fuel, you most likely will not have to intervene in the fuel system. This is largely due to software suffocation. Moreover, they limited the Russian diesel Toyota Land Cruiser 200 so much that after chip tuning the V8 adds about 25% of traction, and this is very noticeable during acceleration. At the same time, it does not prevent the diesel engine from turning off the EGR system, which pollutes the intake system with deadly soot. There are no questions about the resource of the diesel piston group. It will survive 2 replacements of snails and will not choke. Few, but all are reliable. We give the first place in the indestructibility of the TLC 200 with fanfare to the transmission. The first 200 TkM of automatic transmission and a string of gearboxes will pass in one breath, but on the condition that you change the oil in a timely manner where it is supposed to and where the manufacturer recommended not to climb. Everything is clear about the Rizdaka, the front gearbox and the rear axle. They are on the list of routine replacements, but the AB60F hydromechanical machine will have to be serviced at will. If you do not change the oil in the automatic transmission, then natural wear products by 200 TkM can clog the valve body. So the manufacturer's recommendations in this case are more likely to be nailed than to have a stable positive impression of the owner about the legendary SUV. Despite the fact that many manufacturers of the once brutal off-road vehicles are gradually switching to light versions, the Toyota Land Cruiser 200 still uses steel levers in front and a continuous axle in the rear. There is nothing to break. The first replacements are usually required only by 150 TkM when the stabilizer bushings finally get tired. After another 50 TkM, the silent blocks of the levers crack, but thanks to the already wadded handling, the owner will most likely find out about this only closer to 300 TkM when the first knocks and breakdowns appear. Monumental. True, for this kind of unpretentiousness, something will have to be foreseen. The KDSS system for turning off on the anti-roll bar consists of hydraulics, which means that once every 100 TkM it is better to update and pump the fluid in it so that you do not have to change rather expensive hydraulic cylinders. At the first sign of failure, premature tire wear begins, and the TLC body rolls noticeably. You won't miss this moment. Many owners completely eliminate the entire system by installing a conventional one-piece stabilizer. By the way, the same rule applies to the adjustable hydro suspension installed on the top versions of the restyled Land Cruiser 200. Change the fluid and you will be happy, with a length of more than 100,000 kilometers. Unexpectedly and not very pleasantly surprised by the steering of the Cruiser, there are few problem-free places, except that the amplifier pipes do not bother with leaks. The rest are all complaints. Usually the gentle ears of lovers of the Japanese cruiser are disturbed by knocks when driving through bumps, coming either from the steering rack, which can and should be repaired, or from the cardan of the steering shaft, which will have to be changed. By the way, the crosspiece is also most often to blame for the tight steering effect. But not always. Sometimes the power steering pump turned out to be a weak point, driven on diesel versions by a timing chain. When the pump wedge breaks, the chain breaks and the painfully known among motorists stick valves and pistons. In general, it is better not to delay the diagnosis of a tight steering wheel. Perhaps you will not find the owner of a Toyota Land Cruiser 200 who does not scold his boar-like all-terrain vehicle for bad brakes. And bad in every way. They have neither the proper efficiency nor resource intensity. Pads have to be changed every 15 to 20 TkM, brake discs are only half as often. Everything would be fine, but the increased thermal load has led to the fact that all the moving parts of the calipers, including pistons and guides, quickly turn sour, lose their mobility, and over time this leads to even faster wear of the friction clutches. Graphite grease will help you. Pre-styling 200 were also seen in the leakage of brake fluid through the cuffs of the ABS block. Now this is no longer relevant, someone fixed it himself, someone under warranty. At least, in the selection of used cars, such a disease no longer occurs. In terms of interior accessories, the Land Cruiser 200 behaves like a typical Japanese. That is, nothing breaks. Even something that, due to time, loses its aesthetic qualities, does not cease to fulfill its purpose. According to the died but do principle, the stove fan sometimes works, in which the guide bushings can fall apart with a rattling sound, but it will not stop blowing air into the cabin. The same applies to the heating filaments of the driver's seat. They can move out of position, forcing the driver to experience any inconvenience, but not temperature. Nothing else bad happens in the cabin. The quality of the materials is not Lexus, but by the first 100,000 kilometers, the interior of the 200 looks very fresh, if not in a new way. On the one hand, it's good when the car does not lose its original appearance. On the other hand, Land Cruiser until 2015 release does not store mileage anywhere else, except for the dashboard. This means that twisted mileage can be calculated by electronic methods, unless the spotter rubbed errors behind him, and the assessment of indirect signs is difficult due to the low susceptibility to wear. With the greatest accuracy, only the experience of inspecting cars with obviously real mileage will work here. Compare. After the restyling of 2015, the 200 acquired a vehicle control history flight recorder, where many events are recorded, including ABS activation, kickdowns, and so on, and along with this, time and mileage are recorded. That is, in this way you can calculate not only the real mileage, but also understand for yourself what driving style the owner had. We have not yet learned how to correct mileage in VCH. The body of the Toyota Land Cruiser 200 is almost sinless. Only one place worries the owners: the frame, which is covered with corrosion. This does not lead to anything serious. However, many carry out additional processing, although I would recommend protecting only one place from rust: the platform with the VIN number behind the right front wheel. I think that in relation to the TLC 200, as the market leader in large SUVs, the question of whether it is worth buying at all is not the most appropriate, since any equipment and any selected engine with proper care will not present major problems. If you are going to take the car for a long time and want a very minimum of problems, then it is better to look at the gasoline version. The only pity is that there are few of them on the used car market. It is important to remember that good copies on internet sites usually appear at inflated prices, and even in an overpriced form do not stay on sale for more than 3 days. Europeans in the genus Touareg can only envy such liquidity. Those Cruzacs that hang out at the bottom of the market for weeks, in 99% of cases, do not represent anything good. Twisted mileage and technical issues are the main reasons why TLCs are weeded out. Interestingly, there are few broken cars. Summing up, we recall that the list of weak points of the Toyota Land Cruiser has been replenished with the transition to the 6th generation. The Vucaka is now difficult to compare in terms of endurance with its predecessor, but still Cruzac remained Cruzac, and there are still no equals to him in his class and are unlikely to be in the near future.